Greek mythology is the foundation for everything that we exist, everything in our world, okay, including the medical symbol, right? We talked about that. So there's nothing that doesn't, in your life right now, currently, that doesn't really connect back to either Greek mythology or the Greeks, right? Music, math, science, your pen you're writing with, words, language, right? It all has its root in the Greek world. So this is Pythagoras. We talked about the musical scales. I didn't show you this video. It's less important because we already talked about it a little bit. But basically the story is that he walked by and he heard hammers. This is the story that is pretty typical or mainstream. So he would walk around, he walked by and he heard hammers on nails where people were working, and he got the musical scales from that. However, we're smarter than that, aren't we? These stories that are sort of in your textbook, they're also mythos. Okay, who was there? Anybody? I wasn't. So we know that Pythagoras' theorem was already existed in India. We know that because of art, right? Because the musical pillars. The musical pillars have the musical scale on them. It's a little bit different because it's the Hindu version, but it's slightly different, but it's very similar. So, and that is a long time before Pythagoras. All right, so when you learn in math class in, I guess, 4th grade or something around there, that Pythagoras discovered the musical scales, we know that everything's borrowed from the ancestors. So we talked about philosophers, and in the book, I expect you to read some of the great quotes. You know them, you hear them, and if you want to be smart at a party and you want to look good, you just, have a couple of those memorized, and you will win over the room every time. Everybody likes Greek. Okay, we talked about misogyny a little bit. In Greece, we're going to actually go into that a little more because we're going to look at what it was like for women in ancient Greece. However, if you were considered, the gods and goddesses, the women had power, but they weren't human. And we're going to watch a little video on this, but women did actually hold significant power in Greece, but they weren't the average women. So they were the priests, or they had priestesses. Actually, if you were a priestess, then you were able to hold power as a female in Greece, or a regular lay person. So they're titles that you could hold and have power. We talked about the Library of Alexandria and the significance of that on our culture today, because so much of that information about math, science, astronomy, and everything has been, and medicine. So we're going to look at that one. We talked about mosaics because that's mostly the way that they actually created art. It's mosaics, statues, and frescoes. Yes, we know that. Okay, so we talked about mosaics and how that's one of the reasons we have their art is because this is all natural stones. They're not painted. So paint fades over, we're talking 4,000 years ago, so that's a lot of time. That's a lot of war, that's a lot of destruction, that's a lot of everything. So the mosaics, everything was gorgeous, right? So art isn't art. Obviously the floors were art, the walls were art, everything was art. There is no art. Like today, this room isn't very decorated, but that's not how it would be in the olden days, right? Especially in these times. Everything was decorated. We talked about symbols. So every god and goddess has a symbol, and these are still used today. These are in astrology, some of these symbols. Okay, that's Pluto, that's Athena, which is an asteroid. Some of these other ones aren't used on a regular basis, but we keep these symbols to this day. So 4,000 years later, we're still using those symbols to represent, like the symbol of Venus, for example, is the same. And then we talked about chaos, because chaos is the beginning of everything into the Greeks. That's their origination story, and out of chaos comes all life. And chaos is a feminine principle, and it's a black void of emptiness, dark matter. So if you know anything about science, everything comes from dark matter. So like if you are interested in gardening, you're going to put a seed in the ground into the darkness, right? So therefore, all life comes from dark matter. And it's the light that makes it grow, but without the darkness, it can't be created. This is the symbol. This is the Greek symbol for chaos. We also get chaos theory from this. So much of science comes from Greece, right? And that's on your test. Then we talked a little bit about the Olympians and some of the stories, and like I said, if you were a Percy Jackson fan, you probably know more about it than me. But also there's different versions, okay? So there's different variations on the story of the gods and goddesses, and but basically who birthed who is still there. And Uranus and Gaia came from chaos. So Uranus was first born to seed chaos, the dark matter, and then is birthed Gaia, which is earth. So that's the creation myth. So there's no Adam and Eve in Greece. There is in Sumeria, right? Sumerian culture.